Welcome back to Naval Action and episode 23 of A Letter to the King. Those of you new to the series, A Letter to the King is my attempt to detail the biff and the bash that's taking place on PvP Euro 1. Before I get stuck into things, a bit of an apology. I'm probably the best part of 36 hours late, and that's due to the fact that the koala-powered internet in my part of Australia failed after a power cut. My telco informs me it will not be back online till Wednesday. It broke on Monday morning and it won't be back till Wednesday. I may as well live in Afghanistan. That aside, thanks to a few folks in the community sending me screenshots and info through, I've managed to cobble together this week's episode. So let's have a little look-see at where we were before the week's activities began. So we've just started what I'm referring to as the Alliance Wars now, which is the game devs have implemented the new mechanics to allow us to choose our friends and enemies, and as a result there was only a little bit of PvP the previous week, and what we see is the alliances positioning themselves. We have the French, the Swedes and the Danes. The French really were beginning to put pressure on the Dutch in the south portion of the map. The Brits had pushed the Danes back to the edge of Haiti. The Swedes were left wondering whether or not their combatants would be the Brits or the pirates. The Dutch were still managing their buffer zone with the Spanish. And the Spanish obviously would see a threat coming from the British. So probably the first event that took place, and if we just check out the alliances, this played out as expected from the previous week. So the Brits allied up with the Dutch and the French allied up with the Danes. Following that, and this was still pending, it's now being confirmed, the Brits then allied up with the Americans, the Danes allied up with the Swedes, history burn, the Danes and the Swedes together at last. The Spanish allied up with the French, and the pirates run around causing mischief. But perhaps the biggest announcement of the week was that the Spanish openly declared war on the British. So that's only 2 or 3 weeks after the Three Admirals Treaty was signed. The Spanish decided they were emboldened and back on their feet, and it was time for them to wreak merry hell upon the British. Let's see how it all worked out. So the week began with a lot of coordinated attacks by what we might call the Danish alliance. So this is the Danes and the Swedes and the Danes and the French. The French really took it to the Dutch out of the Antilles and into South America proper, and they captured a whole bunch of ports off the Dutch. There's an interesting thing that the map will never tell us here, and that is the quality of the battles where at the end of the day a port doesn't change hands. There's a whole thread in one of the forums that just show the merry mayhem that has been going on down in this area with the French taking ports and sinking a whole bunch of Dutch wood, but at the same time the Dutch defending ports, and there's screenshots showing 4 consecutive battles which probably cost the French the best part of 50 ships. So although the French have made good ground against the Dutch here, they didn't do so for free. Many of the ports they captured may not have been able to have been defended, but there were definitely series of screening fleets, collaboration with the Swedes who've moved into El Toco down here, and also timer collaboration in that the Dutch held properties on Haiti, and quite often the number of flags that were being pulled by the alliance was spectacular. The whole conquest screen was being filled up with flag pulls, and what we saw was this trifecta of attacks by the Spanish, the Danes, the French, the Swedes, and indeed the pirates at different times. really putting pressure on what at the time was principally the British and the Dutch holdings in Haiti. There was a Spartan force from the US helping out, but basically what happened was that the British and the Dutch just got slaughtered in Haiti. They got pushed out. The British to some extent had to abandon their holdings in Haiti, and after some very poor management, it has to be said, I think the British got themselves caught in a bit of meeting deadlock where there were so many flags being pulled. Some of the leadership that has historically been in the British factions is still on hiatus. So there's a sort of new leadership team in place. And early doors, when the attacks came screaming in from the Swedes, the pirates, the Danes and the French, the British probably spent more time in meetings than they did in port battles, and as a result Haiti went from being tentatively defended to completely lost, and the Danes and the Swedes absolutely slaughtered the Brits on Haiti. Not through a lot of resistance, but any resistance that was met was crushed. The oddball thing, and this is just the lovely chaos of the pirates, is that not only did the pirates participate in biffing the British, at the same time they were biffing the Swedes, and the Swedes were indeed biffing the pirates. So hurrah for that little bit of chaos. There was also some excellent sort of out-of-port PvP going on. I know the French gave an absolute shellacking to a British first-rate fleet here, and if you've seen one of my other videos, the British rather hilariously met the Swedish Coast Guard, a large fleet of gunboats, if such a thing can exist. And that resulted in a great deal of hilarity. And I know for one that in many of the battles, the fights have been, how can we put it, sporting, in that there's been a lot of tipping of hats after some very, very ferocious but well-fought battles, and a fair amount of ribbing each other without it getting sort of too personal and nasty. So that's well done, everybody involved in that. That's good to see. What happened next was the Brits basically got pushed by the pirates, and the Spanish out of the, my animation for the pirates has gone there, but they were here, some organised fleets came in here. Now this didn't happen straight away, there was defence for a while, but eventually with the multiple flags being pulled across Haiti and southern Cuba, the pirates and the Spanish managed to retake the Cuban southern tip, and were also beginning to threaten Little Cayman and Georgetown, as well as, I think that's Mysteriosa, they managed to snaffle up. So the first half of the week really saw strong aggression from the Danes, strong aggression from the French, the Swedes, and the Brits and the Dutch were left a little bit floundering. The US weren't challenged directly. I think that was possibly a deliberate tactic. The focus was really on the Dutch. They took the brunt of it in the first third of the week. And then the British were under pressure from, three corners of the map, and very much got bullied out at the south side of Cuba. Haiti is now a Danish-Swede affair with a little pirate outpost at St. Nick. And this was I play in the Aussie time zone, so this was a real surprise to me. We decided that our Aussie campaign, because all of these timers over here are very European, this is all 4 o'clock in the morning for us, so we decided this would be our area of operation, and we committed to fighting all of our ports in this area, and then waking up at idiot o'clock on Saturday and Sunday, or indeed not going to bed on Saturday because of the event, in order to have a crack at retaking the Yucatan. There was a fair amount of salt amongst some of the Aussie Brit clans, because these had all been the ports that only a couple of weeks ago we'd given back to Spain as part of the alliance, and so now we decided it was our mission to take them back. But shock and horror. The first half of the week, the British force on what is known as the Oceanic or Australian time zone was simply met by a better organised, more capable and larger fleet. And actually, although the Aussie contingent, emboldened by insomniac Americans, had a good crack at the Spanish. They simply couldn't break the Spanish. Cuyo was the main battleground, and indeed the Spanish were counter-attacking down into Tantrum, Cozumel and Chupar. Not much changed during the start of the week, and the British decided they needed to regroup. And this is where some of the new leadership really stepped forward for the British. So a massive campaign was planned. The Spain Pain Train was devised, and it initially began with attacks on the middle of Cuba rather than going for the expected. This was sort of the this was sort of the Calais D-Day misdirection. Rather than going for the expected attacks, retorts on southern Cuba, indeed the attacks were aimed at the heart of Spain proper. Initially it was only 1 or 2 ports that were grabbed up, but as you know in the game now, once you take a port you hold it for 2 or 3 days, and that gives you that bridgehead. So the Brits really hammered into the Spanish centre and progressively began to walk along the centre, retaking the islands as they went. And then in a massive, and this was the biggest operation sort of on the Aussie clock, we had a lot of help from American and Dutch friends, and it was brilliant as well. Just to give you some idea of how this works, first couple of nights we were calling out in the nation chats, in our Alliance nation chats, for assistance, and people began to set up free ports or ports in some of the British held ports. But it was a trickle. And then after the daytime shift had basically given the Spanish a decent kicking, that brought the sort of the Pain Train up to momentum, and we rocked up with 3 operational fleets of combined forces. And to be honest, we were initially met by practically no resistance up here in the Gulf, and that was when we knew, or the Brits knew, that it was on for young and old. And so a fleet was taken. Half a dozen small fleets were commissioned to retake the islands and push back down out of North America into Mexico. And Corrientes, or Coriander as we call it, was taken. And again, huge help from the Dutch and the USA contingents. And once Corrientes was taken, we had a hilarious go for Baja, or as we refer to it, Badger, in Aussie speak. And this is where I had my personal best fun of the week. We came over to Corrientes. We were spotted by half a dozen Spanish pubbies who stood and died manfully. And that was probably the most important thing of this particular engagement. In doing so, they gave the main Spanish contingent a chance to form up outside Baja. We sent in a screening fleet. I was part of the screening fleet. And again, just a bit of an insight as to how it works if you're not in a clan. We had a whole bunch of pubbies turn up, clanless or small clans, like matey mate clans turn up. And of course we had our friends from the Americans and the Dutch turn up. So when we took the main ports that we were after here, our key ports that we were after here, we basically used a rotation system to make sure that anybody who didn't get into these port battles would participate in these port battles. And that made sure everybody had a go. So even if you didn't have the best fit ship, you might have had a Connie instead of an Inga, or you might have had an Essex or a Trink instead of a fourth rate. We were prepared to sort of wear a suboptimal fleet composition on the basis that everybody who turned up got a go. So a bunch of us who were in our sort of gold, super sexy, min-maxed Inga fleets here, we swapped out into our more disposable Bellonas and Pavels, which have all been somewhat superseded by the sexy Busantaire. And our job was to screen, and screen we did, and we came flying around the corner and met a really impressive looking Spanish fleet. We tried to jump in on their bigger ships, on their Santis and Vics. After our first engagement, there was about 8 of us in second rates, third rates. We thought we were onto a good thing, because we'd snagged up a couple of first rates and a couple of second rates and a few frigates, and we quite fancied our chances until we realised the buggers had had a social tag on. So by the about the 10th minute of this battle, instead of it being 8 on 8, and we were pretty confident that we could bully the fourth rates and focus down the first rates and ignore the second rates. That probably wasn't the strongest part of our plan. What happened was it ended up being 20 versus 8. Now, we were the screening fleet, so we thought that's brilliant. What a great bit of screening we did. We'll change our tactics rather than aggressively engaging the fourths and the firsts and ignoring the seconds. We'll pull off a little bit and just try and hold this enormous fleet, which was mostly fourth rates, 20 ships. We'll hold that. Our screeners, that'll be our job. Hold that while the main contingent, another 30-odd fourth rates, came round the corner to assault Baja. And as we were doing all right and holding our own and playing win games like you do, we kept not seeing the conquest beginning. So I jumped over to speak to the battle command of the main fleet, and they'd been engaged by 2 other fourth-rate fleets. So there was 3 battles raging around here, and it would have been somewhere in the order of 50 Spanish ships to 40 British ships, something in that order, with the British ships having a bit of perhaps a higher BR rating because a lot of the Spanish were just puppies thrown together. And it was a huge battle. Spain won the day. So although they took an absolute shellacking, they also, when they drew together, as we'd seen at the start of the week, they were a competent and capable fleet. So it's a bit interesting wondering what's going to happen with Spain going forward now. They have moved a lot of their coordinated battle tactics to the forums, where we're seeing a little bit of SALT, a little bit of QQ, but we're also seeing a fair amount of 07 and tipping of the hats too. So a few people are they're recognising the fact that this was a pretty well coordinated and concerted effort. So will Spain say, oh, well, the new port mechanics are coming out soon, we can't be bothered, we're just going to stop fighting again and leave their poor puppies to the jaws of British gankers? I don't know. Or will they rise again, as they did, like I say, at the start of the week? The Spanish outmuscled the British significantly. So that's going to be very interesting to see. I'm expecting attacks on Jamaica proper from the pirate, Danish and Swede contingent. The social tag makes that a lot harder because just a few lone puggies can now pull in a fleet and leave that fleet exposed, whereas before they would have been massacred. They're now exposed to all sorts of nasties joining them. The opposite of this, of course, will be this rather interesting idea of dual week. I'm personally not a fan of dual week, so in a couple of weeks' time, the 15th, I think, I can't remember exactly, the 7th or the 15th, they're going to implement a dual week where when you tag someone, you don't pull in anyone else. It becomes a one-on-one affair, which is great fun. I must admit, I've reached that point now. I'm a PvP. I don't consider myself to be great. Sort of using elite type speak, I'd say I'm barely competent, but I kind of know what I should be doing. I might not be able to execute it all. I sail with a couple of guys who are really good PvPers, and you can learn a lot of lessons off them. So I know now when I'm up against someone who's good, and I learn from them, and I know now when I'm up against someone who's bad, and I know how to spank them. And so the 1v1 will be sort of good. Get some BR balanced duels out of it. I don't know what they'll do with fleet ships. But for me, I'm happy to carry on with the port battle and stuff. I've had some great battles. I know there's been some fantastic fights just around the map. I've seen screenshots and videos of some of the classic biffing going on between the French and the Dutch, and that's going to go on all week. The pirates, the Swedes and the Danes have all brought significant fights to the Brits. And the Brits have had some real clangers with the Spanish. The US at the moment have played more of a supporting role. They've not taken the assault to the Spanish or the pirates, and a lot of that is to do with the time zoning. The Brits have been exposed as having, yes, they've got a big player base, but their player base is spread reasonably equally across the time zones. And so with the Swedes swapping sides as part of this new war of the alliances, we're seeing that the coordinated weight of the French, the Danes, the Swedes and the Spanish probably is enough to break the Brits and the Dutch. And of course, the US are on a different time zone predominantly. So that makes for sort of an interesting fight where perhaps during weekdays it's to the advantage of the Swedes, the Danes, and co. But perhaps as you get towards weekends where the British numbers tend to sort of stay up late and play in each other's time zones, what you see there is what you see there is that the British are stronger at the weekend and the Dutch are stronger at the weekend. The US can help them outside of their standard time zones. So that'll be interesting, of course, and it all harbours well for the new port mechanics and the new regions. So that's some important news. I'll put a video together once that's a little bit more understood, but the new port mechanics are beginning to emerge, and there's going to be a wipe sometime in September. And all the ports are going, I should qualify that before everyone QQs and bursts into tears. There's going to be a port reset. And all the ports are going to be reset in stages. So firstly a primary reset and then a bit of juggling of free ports, neutrals. And the introduction of regions and the new port battle mechanics. Not sure exactly how that's going to work yet. So when we get a little bit more information, I'll put together a bit of a video on that. Of course, the other thing that happened this week was the second of the test event. So this was also staged. It was random. It was very much like the first event. The difference is being this time that the location was given out in the initial clues. So in the initial clues, they all spoke about ports that were very much in a line along here, with some ports that were in a line along here. Myself and my clan, we tracked about 12 of these messages across global, national and clan chats. So we triangulated and we guessed we would be here. That's where we guessed we'd be. We were out by about 1 square, so we were pretty happy with that. Tragically, we were here and the wind was blowing in that direction. And we weren't alone. Now, there's all sorts of tinfoil hat brigades. Oh, the devs told the British where it was. If you actually look where the event was, it's equidistant from Danish-held territory, British-held mainland. No one has a port over here, by the way. Not a shipped port. British-held territory and Cloggy-held territory. It's a long way from America. It's a long way from the French. Now, even when they're random, they're never going to land somewhere that's equidistant from everybody. That's impossible. But as much as everyone's a bit sad because the Brits got the Lucien blueprint, let's remember the French got the Heavy Rattler, the only big blueprint to drop here last time on this server. But while I was positioning with my clannies, we saw a very large US fleet right next to us. Bigger than our fleet. We saw a huge Danish fleet actually chase me. I don't think they chased me. They were probably heading in the same direction. But you can't tell if someone's heading in the same direction or chasing you in the game. Dane fleet. We saw smatterings of Swedes. That's the correct noun, I believe. We also saw quite a few second-rate pirates who seemed to be up to mischief. So if you were prepared, I got there an hour earlier with my mateys, and we'd triangulated where we thought it was, and our clan and a few pubbies who we'd had with us, we set up in 3 locations, here, and about here. Tiburon, it was below Tiburon, so below Isle Vache, so it was a little bit further along maybe. And actually the guys who were here, they got in first. The wind was good for them because as it began to move round, it wasn't against them, and then it began to push them in. So they got in first, and they got the booty. So I believe the next event is going to be random, and the time zone will be random, which will be good because this is all 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning for me, which is rather knackering. So that's how the event went. Where's the biffo going to be next week? I think the Brits are going to mop up. This is going to be a battleground. We're going to meet standard pubby resistance. Whether or not we meet organised clan resistance from the Spanish, we'll see. I think there'll be a few salvos fired at Jamaica proper. I think the Brits will carry on trying to put the pressure onto Cuba. I'm interested to see if the Americans get involved at all. I'm not sure about Haiti, actually. If the Brits don't meet resistance from Spain and Spain folds, I suspect they will now start attacking off to the east. And with the Dutch totally eradicated in this part of the map, so the French and the Dutch are now eradicated in this part of the map, I suspect the Dutch will bring more numbers against the French down here. And this will probably then depend on whether or not the Swedes are entertained in this area, or whether or not they can keep the French happy with some support. It was noticeable that the Spanish got no Allied support at all, whereas the Brits got a lot of Allied support from the US and the Dutch in this neck of the woods. And I think if I was Spanish, I'd be a bit pissed off with my allies. So they pulled war against the Brits again. That was always going to cause a nasty reaction from the Brits, given that they'd worked so hard on the three admirals. And it has been a hard reaction from the Brits. But they had no allies at all. I think I saw one French renommée. That was about it. No Danes at all. I don't think there's any Danes in this neck of the woods. So Spain's getting no help at all from its allies up here. The Danes, the Swedes and the French are certainly helping each other around here. Tally board. So the British did well, and that's mostly because of the Spanish ports they took. The Brits actually lost a whole bunch of ports on Haiti, so if you think the Danes probably took 10 ports off the Brits, it gives you some idea as to the absolute shellacking that the Spanish have taken. The US played mostly a supporting role this week. The French did well, and did well at the expense of the Dutch. The Danes did well, predominantly at the expense of the British. The Dutch lost everything they held on Haiti and Cuba, and lost some of their mainland to the French, so they had a very bad week, 16 ports. It's the worst the Dutch have been in a couple of months. The Spanish were the big losers of the week, and almost halved their number of ports. And my internet isn't working at the moment, so I haven't seen today's reset, so that could be a lot worse. The Swedes made profit on the north of Haiti, and the pirates slowly winkling their way back into things. So that's where we are with the tally of Splinter, Sail and Blood. And a quick self-indulgence before I sign off this week. I hit 1,000 subscribers, and wow, and thank you. It's funny, I sort of began this as a bit of fun. I'd played a little bit of another game and started putting a few YouTubes up on that. Naval action really suits the YouTubing. The ship reviews are great. The battle reviews are delicious because it's such a good looking game, especially in the big fights. The Letter to the Kings have proven to be well received. And I've made it to 1,000 subscribers, so I'm really, really pleased about that. I never kind of expected that to happen. So a tip of the hat and thank you very much. I will, if my internet ever comes back this week, I will run a bit of a competition, and I'll probably give away a free victory. I haven't got the Laosian blueprint, unfortunately. But I'll probably give away a free victory. I'll craft a victory and give it away to somebody who does something in a wee competition I'll hold that will be very simple. So thank you very much for that. I'm enjoying making my videos. I'm enjoying the banter I get in community. Sometimes I feel as though I do get shot a bit more than your average punter should, but that's all right, because at the same time I get lots of chat with folks from different nations, so it's all good as far as I'm concerned. So thank you very much. I'll see you next week in Letter of the King. I'll do a couple of videos in between if bloody Australia ever gives me my internet back. And I will see you on the oceans, and I will catch you.